This is a video for Asus support. It's regarding the issue on my Strix-F Z690 with the HDMI port with any BIOS revision above 2403. So as a baseline here to start, I'll reset the BIOS. I'll put it to optimized defaults. And just save changes. So this is the latest BIOS, the release BIOS, not the beta. So if I log into Windows, right, so this is with the latest BIOS. If I start by opening the Intel Graphics Command Center that was mentioned in the email. It says to go to custom and scroll down. There's nothing there regarding changing color format or on default. Nothing at all. There's no option to change between those two color formats. So if we look here at the display settings, it's YCbCr420, which is a reduced bandwidth color format. It's usually used for films and things like that on a TV, from like a Blu-ray player or something like that, and it should be RGB. And it's difficult to see on this video because the foam seems to be correcting it, but there's a lot of colour fringing around. The text is extremely blurry, and that's because of this reduced bandwidth mode. You can see there those two colours there, and if I open Chrome, it's everywhere. It's extremely annoying and makes it very difficult to use the computer. It gives me a headache, and it looks pretty bad, and it's the color, the overall colors on everything are reduced as well, because that mode is a reduced bandwidth mode. So I have updated the chipset software with the latest versions from your website, and that's made no difference. I've also tried the latest Intel graphics driver, and you can see by this text here how difficult that is to read. And I do a lot of text work, a lot of programming, and that's pretty unbearable to view. The phone is actually correcting some of it, but you can see that's not right. But to the naked eye, it's everywhere. It's almost like a 3D video with the blue and red glasses that you'd put on. You know, it's really bad. So we can see that it's booted up in that mode. There's no settings I can change anywhere to change that at all. So that's running the latest BIOS. And just going back to the display, this is a professional 32-inch LG display, IPS panel, fully calibrated with certificates, etc. And everything's set up correct on here. So if we look, this HDMI ultra deep color is enabled. That's so it can do 60 Hz 4K, and that's all enabled, and 8 and 10 bit, etc, etc. If I disable that, it goes to 30 Hertz. So that's all correct. Nothing wrong with the monitor. There is no firmware for the monitor, and there was mention of a driver for this display in an email. If I load that email up here, it says on the monitor support page, the only driver that's listed here is for Windows 10, and that's dated 2023. The driver that Windows provides is newer than that, and this is Windows 11. I have actually tried to download that and install it. It doesn't make any difference. There's no change with that. This other stuff here, that's not drivers, that's software for picture-in-picture and things like that, you know. Other functions on this monitor that I don't use, but I do use more than one monitor. I've got a professional Philips 4K monitor that behaves exactly the same with this. It shows this wrong color format, and I have the same artifacts on it. I've got a number of BenQ monitors. It does exactly the same on there, so it's not an issue with the monitor. I've also got an LG 48-inch C2 OLED display, and it does the same thing on that regardless of setting on the device. So that's 4 or 5 monitors I've tried, and I have this issue, but this is my main monitor that I need to use. So there are no other settings I can change in Windows, and I've done the firmware updates. Sorry, I've done the BIOS update, and I've installed the chipset drivers, and I've gone through this and checked the Intel graphics utility. So without changing any settings or drivers in Windows, I will reboot to the BIOS, and I will install BIOS version 2403. And I will reset the defaults to optimized and boot back up into Windows. Just while I'm waiting for the BIOS to open, I've tried numerous HDMI cables. I've been out and bought more. They are HDMI 2.1 compliant. I've taken the HDMI cables off the LG OLED display that I've got as well and tried those. You know, they're very high quality cables, very thick, and they meet the 2.1 standard. So it's absolutely nothing wrong with the cables, and the only issue is when I put a BIOS on there that's newer than 2403. So if I go to the Easy Flash utility and I downgrade the BIOS to 2403, now that's going to take some time. So rather than keep this video running, I'll pause the video, let that flash the BIOS, and then I'll come back and clear the BIOS and boot into Windows. Okay, so the BIOS is updated, and I'm going to let it restart and then load optimized defaults. I'll just pause it a second. Okay, so that BIOS is updated and the system's just powered itself back on. So hopefully I can get into the BIOS pretty soon and load the optimized default. Okay, so the keyboard's lighting up now, and it's got the old ROG logo there, so we can see it's now 2403. Just to verify that, if I can remember where it is. There we go, 2403, and there's the build date. So if we load optimized defaults and reboot the PC. So the keyboard's come back on. Okay, it's booting. Okay, because I've downgraded the BIOS, I need to put my BitLocker key in, so bear with me. Right, so I've put the BitLocker key in and Windows is starting up. So this is with BIOS 2403. And straight away I can see the colours are more vibrant. And let's just check if I can get my pin in there. 8. Okay, that's a lot better as well. The colours are much nicer there. So the text is perfect now. So none of those weird colour fringing issues. It's absolutely perfect. The colour is pin sharp. The text is absolutely pin sharp. So if we look at the display settings now, and it's correct, it's RGB at 60 Hz, 4K resolution. But if I put any BIOS on here above 2403, that changes to the reduced bandwidth version. It's something to do with the BIOS. Something has changed in the BIOS. It's either reducing the HDMI bandwidth, or it's been configured somehow to activate that other mode, which is more suitable for a television or something like that. But you know, that's working absolutely perfectly now. The text is absolutely perfect. And if I put any other BIOS above 2403 on here now, that problem will return. So it's nothing to do with my monitor or any of the other monitors that I own. Something has changed in the BIOS, and I would really appreciate it if somebody could have a look to see what has changed, whether it's some ID thing, CEC ID or something like that, or the bandwidth allocation for the HDMI port, or whether it's been configured for HD TV instead of a computer screen, or anything else. But you know, as you can see, that is correct, absolutely correct. And just to go back into the monitor settings page, haven't changed anything in here, and it's HDMI Ultra HD deep color. I haven't changed anything on here. And of course, when that issue was present here, I did mention HDR doesn't work. So if I press HDR now, HDR works absolutely perfectly. With the other BIOS versions, if I press that, that toggle does not engage. The screen goes blank for a second and it just stays on off. So we can see RGB with HDR. If I turn HDR off, it'll go back to RGB. So it's definitely something in the BIOS. I've tried every driver, the chipset driver on your website. I've updated the Intel graphics drivers. I've changed several BIOS settings, and there is absolutely no way I can get that back to RGB. The only thing I can do is to put BIOS 2403 on there. So again, I really do appreciate your help with this matter, and I look forward to a resolution.